Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. Through our first bleed to our last, we come to know ourselves more deeply. This is a platform to reclaim the sacredness of all of it. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach, specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hey, you all, welcome back to the show. We have another solo episode today. I love doing these solo episodes because they really come from questions that I get asked from clients, from people posting in my question boxes on Instagram, from what women in my membership are talking about. And so something that has really been up lately, and I've wanted to record this episode for some time, and it just never quite felt right. I actually even tried to record it maybe 2 months ago, and I recorded this like 30-minute podcast, and it was just gone. It just never uploaded to the cloud or whatever happens in upload world. So it just wasn't meant to be. But here we are again, and this has really been up. And so I really want to talk today about PMS. This is maybe something that a lot of you can relate to. And I want to really start with just sharing my story and just inviting you for a minute to settle into your space. Perhaps you're listening while cooking, perhaps you're driving, or maybe you're just sitting and listening to the podcast. If that's what you're doing, I love that for you. I love that slowness. I'm sitting here with my coffee. It's 10:33 a.m. on December 2nd, 2025. And I am on day 24 of my cycle. So in the luteal, which makes this topic even more relevant. So today I posted something on Instagram that was vulnerable for me to share. I've shared a lot of my story with you all on this podcast, and that actually feels really good and nourishing because I know that the people listening here are generally, if you're listening, you're really resonant with this way of living, this way of attuning to our bodies and embracing the path of womanhood. And so I also just want to say thank you. I've gotten some feedback recently about how this podcast has helped women feel not alone in their experience. And that is really the whole point here. And I hope that this episode supports you in that as well. On Instagram, it sometimes feels a little different to me. I actually don't think too much about what I share on Instagram. I just do it. But sometimes I think after I do it, and it's, wow, a lot of people are going to see this. And I shared a video of myself on my floor clutching my womb and crying and said, it's that trend. Maybe if you're listening to this later, this will be dated, but there's this trend where people are using that Fleetwood Mac song, Silver Springs, and saying in your 20s, blah, blah, blah. And then it's important that you, whatever. And so I said, in your 20s, you'll be told that the depression you fall into before your period every month is just hormonal and to deal with it. And then I posted a series of videos of myself over the last year being in my joy. I really identify as a happy person these days, which is something I'm really proud of. And I said, it's very important that you don't listen to men in white coats and you claim your sense of internal vitality and innate health. So I've shared this on various episodes, including my own story. If you haven't listened to my own story, you can check that out. You can also follow me on Instagram. You can also book a free discovery call or look at my course, Moon Cycle Mastery, in the show notes. All of that is always in the show notes for you all loves. And I have shared about kind of the symptoms that I used to deal with that really impacted my quality of life. And the way I want to talk to you about this isn't necessarily from the lens of, oh, my periods were so painful, even though they were. In the post that I shared on Instagram today, I wrote about how I have the visceral memory when you just can feel in your body when you remember something of waking up in the middle of the night, leaving the dorm room that I had been sleeping in and going to because I didn't want to wake anyone up. I didn't want to wake up my roommates with how much pain I was in. But I remember waking up in the middle of the night in such bad pain that I just felt like I needed to sit over the toilet and heave. And so I went to the like public dorm bathroom at 2 in the morning, and I was in so much pain that all I could do was like lay on the cold floor. And eventually my boyfriend at the time called me. Was like, what's going on? Had to pick me up, carry me to the car, and take me to the emergency room where they tried to give me whatever regular painkillers they had. It didn't do anything. And so I ended up getting morphine injections. And the craziest part about that, you all, is that didn't just happen once. There was a few times I went to the ER for menstrual cramps or to urgent care for menstrual cramps or was screaming on the floor or over the toilet with menstrual cramps. And it makes me think of how many women just think that's normal. Yeah, I remember when I was traveling this year at a hostel, when I told one woman the work that I do, she was like, so you mean to tell me that menstrual cramps aren't just because I'm unlucky? And that moment just reminded me that, like, the profound ways that we have failed the women in our culture, that they believe that something like being in debilitating pain that keeps you from living your life. I have a client who said, I just hope that I don't get my period on days that I have to go into work because I won't be able to function. The fact that we've convinced women that's normal and just something to deal with is absolutely absurd. You were not designed to be in pain for half of your life. And that was my talk about period pain. But I think that sometimes the PMS is, I don't want to say worse, but people can get, oh yeah, pain sucks. But when people think of PMS, it's often just, oh, you're just hormonal. She's just hormonal. She just has to deal with it. That's just why women aren't good leaders or why we shouldn't let women make big decisions because they just get hormonal. Or there's all these trends of men talking about the luteal phase online. And I do sometimes think they're funny. But I think that there's really something for us to reflect on here as, is it normal to actually be this way? So let me back up a little bit and tell you about my story with PMS, and then I'll end with a question for you. So it's actually hard for me to track when PMS dropped in for me because I was so out of touch with my cycle. I had no idea when I was going to get my period until I was like 25, maybe a little younger, maybe 23 or 24, when I started not even really tracking my cycle, but just, yeah, being more in tune with my body through yoga and meditation and different things that led me to the womb path. But I would presume that I had PMS for most of my life because I always used to, now I say I identify as a happy person. I always used to identify as emotional or identify as someone who has the tendency to get depressed or to feel crazy or someone who is too much, right? Those were things that people said to me that I said to myself. I just felt my emotions and my moods, it was too big for what someone should have. And so when I started tracking my cycle and when I started taking the Blood Mysteries school and being more in tune with what season I was in, I started noticing something. And what I started noticing is that every month, when I would get to that like 5, 6, sometimes even 7 days before my period, a sense of just bleakness would overcome me. And I was never someone who identified as depressed necessarily. But I think that's the best way to describe how I felt. Is it just nothing in life felt exciting for me. I rethought my entire life. Can any of you relate to that? Thinking, oh my God, is this the right job, partner, house, city? Am I doing the right thing with my life? Is there more for me? Am I not doing enough? All of those thoughts of not enoughness, questioning everything. And you'll see when I get to a little bit about speaking to the difference between PMS and the sorceress archetype, why some of these questions are okay. But I could not handle it at the time. I did not have the internal resources to be with the immense mood swings that were happening. I was lashing out at people, including my partner at the time. I was incapable of holding space for my own emotions. It would turn into, I just remember like sinking into the couch and like numbing myself out. Not with substances or anything like that, but just like fully numbing, being unable and uninspired to work, being also in pain, like the headaches, the PMS headaches, the breasts that felt rock hard, the extreme bloating that like sometimes actually hurt my stomach. And then the spotting for like days before my period came. And I guess I just thought, oh, that's the luteal phase. That's what we deal with in the luteal phase. And the way that I describe it now is I had this sense of existential dread. So every day I woke up and it was just like, what's the point? What am I doing? So this is a pretty severe mood disorder, right? And at the time, I thought that was something I just had to deal with. And it viscerally hurt me, you all. Like it viscerally hurt to have that questioning essentially around, am I worthy of living? And that would come up for me once a month. Now, if you can't relate to this, I'm so glad. But if you can, I'm so sorry. And I hope you know that that is not normal. I wanted to end this story with a question like, what do you think? Is this normal? Is this normal to question your entire life every time before your period and feel a sense of existential dread that keeps you from experiencing joy? Do you believe that you are worthy of experiencing joy most of the time? Do you believe that it's possible for you to feel good and at ease throughout your entire cycle? Those are just some things to really tap in with yourself because your internal belief is going to shape this a lot. Because what changed for me is I had a tiny little spark in me that said, this doesn't have to be your reality. And that tiny little spark was because of people who are doing what I do now, sharing wisdom about the cycle. I started working with a practitioner. I started doing all of these things. And even though it wasn't happening fast, I recognized like I can actually do this. And so that's the first step. Now, here's what the allopathic and society will tell you about PMS. You're just hormonal. You're a woman. This is why women aren't good leaders. You should just take birth control and that will fix all your problems. Or maybe you should go to therapy. Okay? And I'm not saying going to therapy is wrong, but I think that oftentimes we think that talking things out is the way to go about every mood disorder, and that's actually just not true. Sometimes our physiology does need support, and I'm going to get to the root cause and multifaceted approach that I think is key here when speaking of something like PMS, because here's the thing. PMS is a lot of different symptoms. Like some people, like myself, tended more towards the mood symptoms, where it's like extreme rage, extreme sadness leading into depression, unstable emotions, nervous system dysregulation, intense anxiety. And that's like kind of one way it can show up. It can also show up as like spotting for days before your flow. That's not normal, right? For to not have a fresh red flow coming right in. Another thing is like the breast tenderness and just that sense of like tightness and pain in a lot of parts of your body. And so we can track that as stagnation, and I'll get to that too. But like breast tenderness, bloating, headaches, mood swings, these are all PMS signs. And I think a lot of us have been told like that's just normal. And you should just take birth control. Obviously, that's not a good decision. PMS is often rooted in the liver, and birth control is going to destroy your liver, and it's only putting a band-aid on what are deeper symptoms that are not things that are anything wrong with you. They're just ways that your body is speaking out and asking for support. That's what I think the biggest reframe is here. You don't have a problem to solve. You have your body speaking to you and asking for you to tend to her with love and devotion. So this is one extreme, the like allopathic society way of thinking of PMS. But here's another extreme that I think is subtle and maybe doesn't get as much talked about. So I'm thinking about the womb healing influencers who don't actually have much knowledge about female physiology at all, telling you to just embrace your wild woman sorceress and that any mood fluctuation or burst of anger should be honored, and that's your power. And if you don't feel it, then I guess you're scared of your own power. Now, I know that can sound intense for me to say, and I can play around with this because I used to be one of those womb healing influencers. Not really an influencer, you guys. I really don't have a big following, so I'm not an influencer. But I used to be one of those people who really didn't know a lot about hormonal physiology before I got training, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Not everyone is meant to go into the depth of hormonal physiology. Like that doesn't make sense. I have such wonderful friends in the realms of like womb massage and cyclical living and things that aren't necessarily rooted in hormones that and I love those things too. But I think that it is very naive to just say, just embrace your wild woman, because the underlying message of that is still just deal with it. That's just part of being a woman. So here's my middle ground. My middle ground is that we need to embrace the wild woman and the sorceress, but we also need to figure out what a healthy luteal phase is and create a balance. If you're listening to this and you are someone who deals with chronically painful periods, consistent PMS symptoms that keep you from living your best life, and other hormonal chaos that leaves you feeling confused and like your body's a broken thing that needs to be fixed, I don't mean to sound dramatic, but I think that you deserve better than those symptoms everyone else has normalized or has told you that are just part of being a woman. Part of my mission here at Moon Baby Magic is to share women's stories, but also to inspire you that your healing is possible. I've worked with dozens of women one on one and helped them bring their periods back, heal their painful periods and PMS, get pregnant, and more. And I put all of the steps that I have taken with them, the foundations, you might say, into my course, Moon Cycle Mastery. It's a self paced course containing 40 plus videos moving you through 4 phases of healing that will leave you in a more happy and healthy state than you might have imagined possible for you. I want you to know that it really just takes that first step. It just takes that initial walking off the cliff and allowing yourself to believe that a better path will appear for you. I know it can because it has for me and it has for so many women that I've worked with one on one and who have gone through Moon Cycle Mastery. If that feels like the right next step for you, I hope you will check out all the details in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. So let's speak to the wild woman sorceress archetype a little bit so that you can get where I'm coming from there if you're not familiar with that terminology. So the wild woman sorceress archetype is the luteal phase of your cycle. Each phase of your cycle has like an archetype and a season. The luteal phase, again, is that time after ovulation until your period. It's the phase that a lot of people feel like their symptoms show up in, like PMS. That's when PMS would show up. The wild woman sorceress archetype is also the life phase of perimenopause and menopause. And so, what we can understand about this woman is that she's in transition. She's in transition and she's quite edgy and like a little bit witchy. Just hearing the name wild woman or sorceress, you can imagine that she's not very societally acceptable. Earlier in our cycle around ovulation, when we're in the mother archetype, we're like this radiant, loving, what people think of when they think of a woman. But when we're in the sorceress, we're a little edgy. My sorceress archetype, I've named her Raven. And I always say that Raven's like catchphrase is that she cuts through discernment with her, or she cuts through bullshit with her sword of discernment and truth. So that's the vibe, if you get where I'm going. And this is also associated with the element of water. I learned all of this from my teacher, Nancy, who will be on the podcast in a few weeks. The element of water. So there's this like emotional, flowy tendency. You're not in a very like grounded place naturally. You're flowing with the tides. There is this wild creativity and the need to move your energy. And that's really important here too, right? Because one of the root causes of PMS is stagnation, specifically liver qi stagnation. And I'm going to get to that a little bit in a moment. But the moving of the energy, right? Remember in my story, I said that I was collapsing into the couch. I was contributing to the stagnation. It's so easy when you have this pain, when you have a mood swing, when you have that feeling of not enoughness to go into a state of collapse. But it is so important that you move that energy. And it might not be immediate, right? It might not be immediate. You might need to go into collapse and then have that sense of collapse in order to then mobilize. Yeah, so this wild woman, like she wants freedom. She wants her voice to be liberated. She wants to speak to all of the things that aren't right in your life. But she's also not here to hurt you. So I want to shift a little bit into a normal and healthy luteal phase in PMS because while I think that we should embrace our anger and our sacred rage, I think that we have to have the nervous system baseline to be able to do. I know that when I first heard these teachings around claim your power, embrace your wild woman, it actually was overwhelming for me. And maybe that was like partly because I was afraid of my own power. I wasn't super embodied in my cycle yet. But I also think it's because I didn't have a baseline of health and wellness and vitality to do that from. And you don't want to like burn, what is it called when people like burn? a candle that's like burning it from both ends. Oh my God, you guys, I don't have the right terminology for this. But you don't want to burn something up that doesn't have space to burn. Okay, you get what I'm saying. A healthy normal luteal phase. So, a healthy normal luteal phase post ovulation is going to be 12 to 16 days. So, after you confirm ovulation with a temperature spike. A normal healthy luteal phase does not have spotting, does not have PMS symptoms like headaches, breast tenderness, severe depression and anxiety type mood swings, does not have extreme bloating or like bursts of anger. A normal healthy luteal phase is you have a good amount of progesterone so that your phase is able to be at least 12 days. And that progesterone is actually soothing and neuroprotective. And so it's actually going to help you be more at ease. That's why you start to get sleepier and a little dreamier in this phase. Progesterone has that tendency, it has that quality about it. And when we have something like PMS, it could be rooted in low progesterone or a few other things. But what I'm really trying to speak to here is we need a balance. We need a balance between honoring this wild woman archetype within us and also knowing when we deserve better than symptoms everyone else has normalized. Okay, so when we're thinking about PMS, this normal healthy luteal phase, yes, you want progesterone to be calming. You are going to have less energy than other phases in your cycle. That's not something to pathologize. That's normal. You are going to be a little bit edgier. You're going to have a little bit less tolerance for things not going well. That's totally normal. Where it becomes not normal is where it's like you're having a huge emotional outburst every time one little thing happens. That's speaking to a deeper issue. So, what are some root causes here of PMS and where can we begin healing? I want to get you all the practical things. So, blood sugar dysregulation and lack of proper nourishment is the first place to start. This was definitely one of my biggest root causes. I was vegan. Some of you know about that. And veganism is a recipe for blood sugar disaster. I can just be really honest about that. And I feel okay speaking of these things because I've been there. And I've been the one who thinks that veganism is the healthy way. But without protein in every meal, and adequate protein and adequate saturated fats from animals, you're just going to have these crazy blood sugar up and down spikes, especially if you're also drinking coffee before breakfast, if you're going more than 4 hours between meals. Those are all ways to destroy your blood sugar dysregulation. This is why in Moon Cycle Mastery, my course, we have literally an entire phase on nourishment, going deeply into blood sugar and proper nourishment, because this is number one, the biggest root cause I see for pretty much any cycle imbalance. It's where you have to start. So, making sure that you are eating breakfast within an hour of waking up, having coffee after your breakfast, including 30 grams of protein in each meal, and eating every 3 to 4 hours, and then stopping eating about 2 to 3 hours before bed. Those are really great ways to support your blood sugar, and this is going to actually really help you a lot in your luteal phase, especially including as your carb source. You still want carbs, but just with protein, including as your carb source, complex carbs like sweet potatoes, really great way. And you are going to be so surprised at how much changing your diet. I've had clients literally say this. Wow, I can't believe how much just changing my diet changed what's happening before my period. It's true. So that's your first place to start is working on regulating your blood sugar. After I did that, after I stopped being vegan, started eating meat, started prioritizing nourishment, I remember thinking and saying to my partner at the time, "Oh my God, I feel like I can just handle life better." And that's the whole point. Okay, repressed emotions and unaligned lifestyle choices. So yes, this does come into play, even though I poked fun at the honor your wild woman thing a little bit. Your inner critic lives in your luteal phase and your sorceress phase. And your inner critic is here to point out all the ways that you're not living in alignment with your truth. What does that mean? If you have an issue in your relationship, maybe that's going to show up as snapping at your partner about the dishes or something really minuscule, but it's actually not about that, right? We've all been there. Or maybe it's feeling really frustrated at work and like being too depressed to want to show up to work. Okay, that's probably speaking to a lack of alignment in your career choice and doesn't mean you need to change everything right away. Although, if you listen to my story, I did change my entire life based on the inner critic, and it actually was the right decision, but I didn't do it immediately. And it could be something very small. It could be like a certain habit you have that's really not working for you anymore. And you get to your luteal phase and it's just, no, that is absolutely not working anymore. And so you really want to give the inner critic a little bit of a voice because this is her home phase. You don't want to entertain her in other phases, and I speak to that in my course too, but you want to give her a little bit of space and also holds the compassion. Holding the compassion of what did I do well with? What did I do well with? And then where am I not feeling in alignment? Where is my arrow not pointing in the right direction? And that's just a gentle exploration for you. Okay, and that brings me to the next point, which is not honoring your fertile energy. So, a lot of times we get into these mood swings when we don't fully utilize the energy of our cycle. And when we get to the luteal phase, there's this inherent grief of not conceiving. And so, even if you don't want to conceive a baby, naturally our physiology is designed to nurture this egg and then release it, and then it breaks down. And if we didn't dedicate our egg to something, a project, a creation, a new way of being, a new habit, we're going to naturally feel a little down in our luteal phase because we don't have anything to harvest. And that, yeah, that's another piece that I think is really key. And then the stagnation piece is the last thing I'll speak to. You can have stagnation from an emotional sense. So that really goes back to these repressed emotions of not feeling what you have to feel. And that creates this stagnation, which creates rage. But also, there's liver qi stagnation, which is the most common root cause in traditional Chinese medicine. So, liver qi stagnation shows up as PMS with the irritability, the breast tenderness, the bloating. It shows up as irregular cycles. It shows up as menstrual pain that usually gets better once you start actively bleeding, right? Because things are then moving. It also shows up as mood swings, sighing, like frequent sighing, and just a tension and a tightness in your ribs and lower abdomen, especially. And this is mostly caused by unprocessed stress. So the emotional stagnation leads to the liver qi stagnation. And this is actually the most common pattern in women's health, and one that I have to track in myself quite a lot. Sometimes I'll notice, I spoke to this on Instagram too, that sometimes I'll notice I have this urge that I need to like sing really loudly and shake and move my body. And it's very important that we listen to those urges. Really, a big way to clear stagnation is movement of all types, dancing, screaming if you need to, swinging your hips, going to the gym, going for a long walk, singing and dancing. These are ways that we can clear this stagnation. And if you're wondering how your liver got impacted in the first place, it's not because you're an alcoholic, I promise. The liver just has a lot of a heavy load in our modern day environment with so many toxins. And even if you live a super clean and healthy life, your liver has probably taken a hit, especially if you're someone who has been on hormonal birth control or another pharmaceutical long term. A couple of practical ways that you can work with your liver qi stagnation is to do castor oil packs over your liver. And I'll put a link for the castor oil pack that I have a discount code for in the show notes. And then also working with milk thistle tincture, which you can get from my mentor Kristen's shopwombmedicine.com. Those are two ways that I've had clients actually stop their bloating before flow, feel more ease before their periods, have their breast tenderness go away. Like these are actual things that I've helped women with by incorporating a mixture of these different practices from the emotional and the physiological lens. So if this is all speaking to you, if you feel like you are someone who struggles with PMS, whether it's more of the mood disorder type, whether it's more of the physical symptom type, or whether maybe you have a little bit of both as I did, I want you to know that you can heal. I want you to know that it isn't just bad luck. You don't just have to like wonder if this is normal and hope that it goes away at some point. There are actual healing steps that you can take. I hope this episode has served as a place for you to start. And of course, if you'd like to go deeper, Moon Cycle Mastery is the perfect place for you. It is my self-paced course with 40 videos going through 4 phases, just like the moon, from education to nourishment to nervous system to self-care practices in the psycho-emotional realm as well. And there's also some bonus content in there that includes specific healing protocols for things like PMS, PMDD, PCOS, endometriosis, fibroid cysts, painful periods, and more. So you can find all of that in the show notes. And I'm wishing you all so much wellness. And I hope you remember that you deserve so much better than these symptoms that everyone else has normalized. And if no one else is, I am your biggest advocate. Thank you. Thank you for tuning into the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly such an honor to bring these stories forward to you, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it could reach more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to join our online community, the Cyclical Living Circle, in the show notes below. There you'll also find the links to book one-on-one virtual sessions, shop the herbal shop, and any group programs that I'm currently offering. Plus, you can follow me on Instagram, and I love to connect with you all there. All right, see you next week.